to another episode of the Going Rogue Gaming Podcast, the Grog Pod. I am your Grog Potter in chief, Scott Berger, and I'm joined with my rogues gallery here.
Grog Podling, Colin Smith.
I'm glad to be here. This is Will.
And today we and in this podcast, if this is your first time listening, we're looking at somewhere around the top 100-ish roguelike games, each per, like, breaking them out kind of by year, and we're as dictated by our mystical and never wrong computer algorithm that has shot these recommendations out to us. And we're going to talk about them. We're going to complain, and we're going to learn a lot about game development history and why it was so hard back then. And before we jump in today's slate of episodes, the algorithm has recommended us to start at this year in the year 2012, which I think we're gonna come to the conclusion that game design has kind of come a long way since the year. And the fact that this genre of games is extremely indie at this stage comes with pluses and minuses. We were very blessed with our first two episodes of Dungeons of Dreadmore and Binding of Isaac to have two very well-established, very polished, I guess, games that have kind of really set a tone and standard at the time. As we move year by year through the decade of this rise of roguelikes, we'll kind of see this pattern mature and crystallize a little bit as to people when they figure out what a roguelike is and what are good and bad design principles for it. But the algorithm has dictated today for us to play 3 games from 2012, and those games are Hack Slash Loot, A Valley Without Wind, and a Pineapple Smash Crew. I think is kind of maybe a primer for 2012 after the world had ended. Steam at this time was still a big deal to get on, and all these games released prior to Steam Greenlight, which is a now shelved feature of Steam that was basically people voting on whether or not if they wanted this game to show up on the platform or not, which as I think we all know, with community voting stuff comes with pluses and minuses about how that can be gamed and all that. But Steam Greenlight came out in July of 2012 of this year, but all of these games came out, beforehand. And so all of these were kind of a big deal to even get on the Steam distribution platform to begin with. And as another kind of primer before we jump into our slate of games today, this might be an all devs go to heaven episode where I think the three of us recognize that game development is a hard and laborious enterprise. And it's okay for people not to like a video game. But game design, like we said, has kind of come a long way since. I think we'll learn a lot about like the tools people were using at the time and how that kind of influences and maybe even limits their game design to some degree. But yeah, I think for any criticism we level at the games themselves, unless the devs really deserve it, and maybe we'll drill into that in future episodes, I think we can kind of all get behind that. The people putting their hard work into these games, we're not dunking on them specifically, but it's okay for us to criticize the product.
You can make a bad game but still be a perfectly good person.
Yes. I don't know about that. I mean, that's tough to say. I don't know if this distinction is required here. I think you have a shitty game, you're probably a shitty person. Am I right?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want someone to judge my moral quality based off of my past work performance.
That's very true.
Will's offering up his R code to the community to be judging by his moral principles, I'm guessing.
Oh God.
So let's jump into it. First game that we're talking about today is Hack Slash Loot, released April 5th, 2012. Released on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and later in 2014 for iOS and Android. And this is the 458th most popular roguelike game on Steam with 713 reviews, topping it out in the 86th percentile of roguelikes.
Wait, so there are 86 This is there. 86% of roguelikes are less good than this game.
No, opposite.
Are less highly reviewed, I should say, or are
I
less
see.
popular. So
Okay.
that number
Have
comes
less
from
reviews. Okay.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is again a kind of shocking pointer to say that like there's a ton of roguelike games out there. Like that's the ranking specifically for games that have roguelike tags on Steam. So there's, you know, like we kind of said in previous episodes, like 5,000 of them. You wouldn't believe how much of that data set, which you can find on the website, has like basically no reviews. You know, people kind of releasing games out into the void, and you know, for various reasons having to do with like marketing and a saturated field and all that, people just not getting eyeballs on them, and a lot of recency bias too. Like I would guess the numbers are in there, I'm sure, but I would guess like half of all roguelikes have been released in the past couple years or so. Something like that.
I mean, it's also gotten so much easier to make a game that is playable enough to go on Steam. Maybe not a great game, but you can get it on Steam at least.
Yeah. So this is Hack Slash Loot, is a top-down pixelated turn-based. I guess I would lump this into the traditional roguelike category.
That sounds right.
Yeah, you know, you're moving around in grids, you're finding tombs, you're picking up this is a game that I think really does what it says on the tin. You hack enemies, you slash them, and you loot stuff.
You also blast them with magic or arrows, but that's basically the same thing.
Yeah. This game was developed by David Williamson, who is a independent game developer from Manchester in England. And he used to run a podcast, I believe, that has not been running for a little while, but you can still find it online, called Pig Ignorant Gamers. I think we can kind of relate to some of that. But he's also released a whole bunch of like really tiny indie games on his itch.io site, oddball.itch.io, which I was kind of curious to dink around in to see like, oh, what other kind of games had he developed? And Will, you might find his street chess game a little interesting. It's a chess variant game where all moves are real time, so you can go and just like, you know, move your pawns up and immediately capture someone's bishop in like 5 seconds.
Oh no,
What?
Will hates real time.
What? This is chaos. This is madness. I don't support this at all.
The anti-beard scratching 20 days per.
I want a game of chess where the board is like the size of a football field, and how fast or how well you play is dictated by like how fast you can physically move the pieces across this board.
You're carrying them up, putting them on your back.
They're like 50-pound giant pieces you have to drag across the field.
The true meaning of bronze and brain in this hybrid game, Colin. This is brilliant stuff.
David Williamson, he got his programming start in the mid 80s on a Commodore C16 PUS/4, which I have no clue what that is. I'm guessing that's one of those, you know, ye oldie systems, but I was amazed that he was saying that it came bundled with like 20 games with it, which is kind of astounding. But I'm guessing back then, you know, the aspect of programming games into I guess I'm a little more familiar with the Commodore 64. Do either of you have much experience with that era of gaming at all?
That's like when keyboards were first invented, or mice were first invented. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any experience with that, but I feel like my most relevant experience is like trying to program games on my graphing calculator in high school, because I was too bored to do anything else. And, you know, you get like Pong and shit on there.
Yeah, you didn't even have the QWERTY keyboard with your, what did you have, 86, 89?
Well, no one had your full QWERTY keyboard. You weren't even allowed to use it on tests.
Hey, I did until they caught me.
But no, I think in conclusion, I don't really, Commodore is, I think, before any of our time.
Right. but yeah, I think he wound up getting his start programming on those very early gaming systems. And he had been a hobbyist game maker for years. But you know, the like distribution and release at the time, very hard to do to a very wide audience. And at the time, Humble Bundle, I think, you know, I'd forgotten this actually, but the Humble Bundle platform was pretty good at like kind of releasing these you know, micro tiny indie games. So that gave Williamson a good platform along with Steam to be able to publish a game, quote unquote, for real. And he was saying it was kind of a nightmare to release on Steam back in 2012, but their staff were actually kind of helpful with getting him through the process, which sort of doesn't surprise me. So you know, it kind of speaks to volumes, and I guess we'll come to this in a little bit for our later games, but yeah, like releasing games back then was not a trivial process. Williamson said that he was heavily influenced in the development of Hack/Loot by Colin. Do you know the tabletop game Eye of the Beholder at all?
I've heard of it, but not played.
Ooh, sorry, no, I have this backwards. Eye of the Beholder was what is it? It was an old-timey like turn-based game. If you find like screenshots or video of it, you can very clearly see like the influence to Hack/Loot with like parts of like inventory management and grid-based movement and stuff like that. But he was heavily influenced by that and tabletop D&D, which also kind of doesn't surprise me to some degree, of, you know, this being a very classic type of game where you have your standard classes of like warrior, archer, mage, and you're kind of going around dungeons and just like beating up monsters and getting, you know, more loot. D&D is obviously more involved and complicated than that, but you can kind of see where the aesthetic inspiration came from. He says in a quote, he had been laid off shortly before working on Hack/Loot, so it was pretty easy to keep a normal work routine but keep working on his game. The things that used to make the initial release were a broken laptop, Blitzmax, and Photoshop elements. I did receive a lot of help from fellow indie developers, though. The indie dev community was probably the most helpful tool I used during development. Which is, you know, a thing that we'll probably see as this podcast goes on, of like this kind of collaborative, helpful community of people that are really, you know, willing to help out with these kinds of things. Williamson, I reached out to him for some of these quotes, because some of these really niche indie games are incredibly hard to track down for like, how was this game developed? What were sort of the challenges involved? And we'll put that up on the website grogpod.zone for you to read in more depth. But yeah, we were able to get some really great comments from David Williamson, as well as our Hack/Loot developer, which we'll get to in a second. Story in this game. How would we describe the story? There's like 6 different quests that you can go on. But for me, I didn't really know that there was like, I didn't get the sense that there was really much of a difference between them.
Yeah, I know Will got further than I did. Is there any story by the time you get to the end of it? Or is it just you get better at, is the story getting better at hacking and slashing?
Yeah,
And
it's
looting.
very I feel like it's very episodic and separate. Like I don't know if there was, maybe I missed something, but I didn't see anything that, like linking the worlds together, other than like you're doing kind of like similar things. You're either going up or down. I don't remember if it was up and down. They're kind of blending together now, but like you're beating a floor, you're going up, you're making, the only real strategy there was just like, do you clear the entire floor or not? So I don't know, like it didn't seem like there was much of a narrative that was driving everything on one within one complete story.
There's kind of a preamble, like there's 6 different quests, quote unquote, that you can do, but I guess like are different sort of tile themes to the dungeons, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like go into the dungeon and go like rescue the princess or the, you know, the small boy, and they all have like different difficulty ratings to them, which this game is like maybe the most difficult game I've ever played.
What? Really?
I don't know. Like I think the So I picked there was one of these I think it's Mask of the Boy King was one of the quests that I picked.
Oh yeah,
that one.
that's the only one I finished.
Was that like the very easy one? I forget.
I don't recall what level that was.
But anyway, I wound up picking like the one that was the very easiest because I'm like, yeah, I just want to like see what this game has to offer. And I don't know, I must have been like bludgeoned to death in the first like 5 moves of this game, like 50% of the time.
Wow. Are you trying to like open up these crypts and immediately fight these high level like skeletons that come out? Because that's
Well,
you do that a couple times. Yeah, you open up some crypts and you're like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Okay, these are treasure chests, but they hurt you every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's a risk reward element, but my playthroughs, I think I was just like, what does this do? What does this do? And kind of like clicking on everything and oh yeah, okay, that'll kill you. So I got the sense really fast that literally everything in this game will kill you.
Yeah, I mean, that was also my sense. And also just that you didn't have a particularly large array of strategies to avoid being killed. Choke point indoor was like my only strategy.
Yep.
And then just kind of hack and hope.
And
Like-
do some slashing too. I mean, hacking,
And
you do
loot.
some hoping, you do some slashing. But I think you're right, Colin. It's basically like doorways. Everything is like only one thing can fit down a corridor, for instance. And if a corridor is one sort of unit wide, you can just, where their numbers count for nothing, you can kind of just wait for them. But so that's one strategy. The only other strategy I found somewhat useful, and this is after like a few hours of play, is once you find the exit to a floor, it's not useful, I think, to just like immediately go up because you want to, you know, get all the loot for that floor. And so what you'll do is you'll go search around, you'll find something that's going to absolutely fuck you up that you can't fight, and then you just flee to the exit. And because this game does not have like units cannot cross floors except for you could just have a safe escape. And so that's really all it is you find a safe escape for when you take on too much.
I did find there were another kind of frustrating element for me was running around this dungeon, or it was a different quest because there were, was it the same quest? I don't know, that like wall, like ghosts moving through walls just ruined so many runs.
Right. Yeah, no, that was the mission where you actually start with allies. So it seems like super useful. They're all helping you, but as soon as they die, they turn into a ghost. And the ghost has the property going through walls.
Uh-huh.
Or
That
there's
really
one with
sucks to get, like when you have enemies coming at you like that, there's an ability, you actually get that ability and travel through walls as a perk, which is an insta-win game. I think that's the only time I won was like when I got that ability through something.
I think there's an interesting element in this game about how like this game really suits a category of roguelikes called coffee break roguelikes, which are games that are like designed to be played in, I would say, like less than 10 minutes or like less than 15 minutes of game time. At least it felt like for me that the main kind of through line to this was play a lot, die a lot, and by dying, that's how you unlock new characters. There's a very sparse but actually kind of interestingly useful wiki for this game that details like how many deaths you need to unlock certain character classes. And what's surprising is it doesn't go up linearly. Like you don't get a new unlock like every 10 deaths. It's like after 10 deaths you get a new unlock, and then after like 12 deaths you get another one, and then after like,
it's like the square. So
Yeah.
it's like everything that is a perfect square root. So like 9, 16, 25, 36.
Wait, what do you unlock? I just never died to them. I'm
There's-
just so good at this game. I just
You unlock, there's like 12 characters. Will.
12?
No.
Yeah.
There's way more than that. There's like, well, because there's characters, and then there's classes on top of that. So there's a bunch of different unlocks, which I think is kind of, it's kind of a shame that you don't get to see that faster. Because I was like, you know, the new characters that you unlock are very different than previous ones, and I think they kind of help to spice up the gameplay. But it just takes so many deaths, and I feel like dying in this game is super unpleasant. Where it's just like,
I mean, I also say that like I wanted to get an experience like a new character or two, so I just played as the wizard and just tried to charge things and then die immediately. It's like, well, how fast can I die? Like, got to get to that like 16 deaths or whatever. It's like, all right,
Is there a counter for this that I didn't notice that tells you until your next unlock how many deaths you need?
It
Yeah, it's
doesn't.
like,
I didn't
oh,
realize this was a dynamic. I
not
guess
on
this is
the-
a couple
on-
weeks ago for me, but
it's like a counter on the main screen, just how many times you died.
Yeah.
oh, okay. It doesn't say deaths until next unlock.
And then I think that would be another good hook in terms of like, okay, why should I keep being frustrated dying? Oh, this really cool Minotaur is going to unlock if I die 5 more times. So I'll go in and just like literally like, you know, this game was actually kind of fun to play on my Steam Deck while my like code was compiling for 15 minutes, because I would just like boot it up, like die 5 times to random bullshit, and then I'd be like, oh, I unlocked a knight. Oh, that's kind of cool. I'll play around with this guy for a little bit. But other interesting things that, so you start off with 3 standard classes: a human Saracen, a woodland elf archer, and a human wizard. And things that you can unlock include a human knight, a human Amazon, a pixie mage, a human ninja, a skeleton lich knight, sounds pretty cool, a human pirate, a titan arbiter, which I have no clue what that is, an eye terror tormentor, a centaur noble, and things of that kind of ilk.
And I think a lot of them are just like strictly better.
Yeah.
Like it's not like putting points in different spots. It's like just starts with more HP and more attack.
Yeah, this is all news to me. I only remember seeing the knight, and I thought it came with that because there was no like, hey, and congratulations, you got this new. It was just oh, hey, look at that one. I didn't see that one
you get the
before.
knight very quickly.
Yeah, and so that's
after 10 deaths or something.
I mean, this is a game mechanic or components, just dangling. Just like expose what you want them to drive for in front of them, but don't give it to them until they complete whatever you're requiring. And it's just like that's an obvious thing. No offense to game designers, but we've known about that since the 80s. Come on, man.
Like, I don't like that it rewards death. I think that it should be like based off floors gained or something like that, because I mean, I ground dying. That's not like a fun gameplay loop. It's like, well, I want to see next character, better just like die as fast as I can a couple of times. Like, and it doesn't reward. You're not rewarded for playing well. You're rewarded for playing badly.
And with the benefit of 10 years of game design after this, I think we'll see how other kind of progression systems have learned these lessons about, like, you know, unlocking characters from small events that occur within the dungeon, or unlocking characters based on like doing objectives or collecting certain things, or like buying their freedom from the shopkeeper or something.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are just like, do a thing that's similar to the character, like play in a style that is similar to the character, and then you get the next character that starts with that style.
I mean, that was Binding of Isaac, right? Like, in order to get the one character that focused on life, you had to like obtain 5 hearts in a run or something.
Yeah.
So it's very much tied together, which is very nice.
Let's move on to our next game. Oh boy. A Valley Without Wind, released April 24th, 2012. You can find it on PC, Mac, and Linux. This is the 569th most popular roguelike game with 484 total reviews, clocking in at the 82nd percentile of the category. In my notes, I have, so what kind of game is this? In my notes, I wrote down side-scrolling, asterisk, 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 platformer, asterisk, 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 RPG with base building, asterisk, 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 because this game is something else. Quick development history on this. This was developed by a very small studio, and small, we mean like between 2 and 5 people at any given time, Arkan Games, who have a fascinating kind of company history novella on their website. This studio was founded in 2009 by Chris McElliott Park, and they have developed some interesting and out of the box games, much to their credit, with varying financial success, which much to their credit for taking risks. But they developed a game called AI War, which is kind of an out of the box RTS game in 2009.
I actually own AI War. I knew about that before. I was reading about them, and I saw that they made AI War, and I was like, oh, another game that seems really cool. And I tried to play it. I was like, this is so overwhelming. It's got so much stuff going on, and I hit the barrier to entry pretty hard, and did not end up getting to the point where I could play it competently.
Mm-hmm. And AI War was a big hit at the time. I think it was out of the box enough that people really kind of shown a spotlight on Arkin at the time. So that pushed them to do something new and try a puzzle game called Tidalus or Tidalus? Tidalus? I'm just gonna say Tidalus. And this one was out of the box, maybe like less commercially successful. But they didn't want to be kind of like typecast as just developing RTS games. Like they developed a bunch of expansions for AI War that were pretty well received. And in 2012, they wound up starting development with A Valley Without Wind. Somehow, believe it or not, this game was somehow a commercial success. I think when we look back in hindsight, we're like, how on earth could that be? But that wound up giving them enough financial freedom to start doing some other projects. They developed a Stay Tuned future episode, Starward Rogue, which nearly bankrupted their company, and they had to lay off like almost all their staff. But they've developed like a bunch of different games of wildly different types and of middling success, but they've always kind of, I think, tried to push the envelope and get out of the box with their game design. Not always successful, but I think they wound up returning to tried and true formulas with AI War 2 very recently in 2020. That game seems to have been more kind of coming back to their success model that people are more familiar with. This was so Valley Without Wind. The development behind this game super interesting, where originally this game was supposed to be sort of like a top-down forced perspective game, kind of in a similar perspective manner as like Final Fantasy VI or like Chrono Trigger, where you have that kind of like 2D element with like things that are in like a 3D like pseudo environment, but it's forced perspective. If that makes sense. This game, I think, was also originally supposed to be a tower defense game, weirdly enough. So the design was sort of in flux and sort of all over the place originally. And yeah, I think the original development for this being that forced perspective meant that they did all of their modeling in 3D first, and then flattened it out into sort of a 2D environment, which was super challenging for them at the time. They wound up changing back to like a 2D profile, like side scrolling design, because unsurprisingly, it's a lot faster to develop that way. Because with the 3D modeling engine, they were saying, you develop in 3D and then you just rotate to one axis and boom, there's your sprite. You don't have to worry about forcing everything to multiple axes. One thing that there are a couple games that the developer wound up saying that he was trying to go for with this game, which maybe sort of could have been a little bit of hindsight, was like Don't Starve. And I think that like when I hear that, I'm like, okay, like that makes a lot more sense for what this game maybe what it was trying to do. But being so far ahead of that was really kind of hard to learn those lessons, because no one had really established that kind of game design before.
I feel like it's not really like Don't Starve at all. Like if I had to compare, I haven't played very much Noita, but that's the game that felt most similar to me in terms of just like really procedurally generated levels where you have almost too much flexibility in how you're running around doing them. Like reading the tooltips on how to use the map is already like we have this intricate mapping system. And like here's our like at the end like here's a paragraph of why we think this is the only appropriate way to map 3D spaces. And like I kind of got where they were coming from, in that like assuming you had to map this strangely complicated 2D 3D landscape, I guess this is the best way to do it. But it seems like a better way would just be make your landscape less complicated to fit the fact that you're doing something in 2D.
This game, I think, is maybe the poster child for tell, don't show. And I kind of get the same impression from the Arkin Games website, where maybe they should have just written like a series of sci-fi novels instead of developing a game. Because I think like there's aspects of the game's writing that I think are interesting, and everything else is just so bamboozlingly over complicated, and just this is the kind of game that if you dig up YouTube videos of it, this is the kind of thing that like distracted children would be playing on the TV in like a standard sitcom of like, oh, look at these games these kids are playing, and it's just like this unintelligible nonsense of like, oh, these kids need to go outside and play with a real ball or something. Like this is a podcast. This is an auditory medium. I'm having an incredibly difficult time describing what this game looks like that doesn't involve the words clip art and just like,
I think clip art's not quite right, but
janky, and yeah, it's bad. It's fragmented motion, and just, well, go ahead, go on.
like the art styles were not all the same.
Yeah.
Like the background and the foreground are of different styles. Like when you jump, you always flip. It felt like, it felt like over ambitious. It was trying to be all games at the same time, and trying to be a platformer, trying to be a RPG base build thing. It felt very shoehorned in. Like, oh, we want to do platforming, but also you have to make your own platforms.
oh my god, the platform
like,
building.
Oh wow, thanks for reminding me. That was
Yeah. So I feel like really both, actually all three of these games, but maybe to a lesser extent the last two, kind of remind me of all of my thoughts about procedural generation, which is I love the idea of procedurally generating maps and procedurally generating things, but there needs to be a purpose for it. Like, oh, unlimited maps. It's like, well, I don't actually need an unlimited amount of maps if they're all indistinguishably they're indistinguishable from each other.
Mhm.
Like there's no defining feature of any of them. I literally could not have told you if this map was the same as the map that I played 5 minutes ago. Like, is the procedural generation really getting you anything?
Yeah.
And I felt like the combat difficulty was, I felt like in order, like I did a couple of the boss missions, it was like, okay, you'll either do some weird cheese strat or you die, or like very hurt. So it's all about like putting your platform down in a very specific way so that you can just kind of barely peek over the edge and shoot down at something, or jump around. And the fact that none of the levels were designed by a human meant that you have to scale your difficulty to assume that that's the best way. People are going to cheese their way through whatever encounter. They're going to just, yeah.
Yeah, and it's an important kind of element of procedural generation that I think people had needed some time to figure out, where, yeah, in Valley Without Wind, and I think with Hack Slash Loot also, like you have an environment that is like randomly generated versus like pre-built, like prefabricated elements that are then randomly like connected to each other. And those kind of prefabbed elements help to kind of guide, some kind of design through line for either a level, or helping to kind of guide your progression for a system. We'll see this in like, later episodes like Enter the Gungeon, or even like you said with I think it's pronounced Noita or Noida, or
I don't know how it's pronounced.
It's Finnish, so I'm not sure if anyone knows how to pronounce it. But in that game, like similarly overwhelming with its size and scope, but feels a little more grounded in that there are like almost kind of like prefabbed like categories of areas that are then like randomly jumbled together. But
yeah, you mentioned Don't Starve earlier, which I think is probably has a wider audience than maybe people have played that game, where it's like, yep, there's the grasslands, and that there's going to be a tunnel at some point, and like everything's in there. It's just a matter of like kind of seeing how it all is connected.
I want to quickly talk about the the opening text crawl for this game,
Holy
which
mackerel,
I
yeah.
think kind of really sets the tone. We'll time to see how long it takes for either one of you to start raising your hand before you get bored from me talking. It is the year 888. Reality. Will is already you've already tapped out. Like all good games, you need I think this takes like 2 or 3 minutes to text scroll across. You don't have to read the whole thing before jumping in, but
I'm
if you're
pretty sure I
interested in the
didn't read
story,
like you know,
I
got
got a
the
paragraph
gist.
in.
Yeah.
but reality has just shattered. Wind blast snowfields have covered the world of Environ for centuries. Citizens in this age, reliant on their magic-driven technology, now find the world an alien place that seeks to devour them. Only glyph bearers chosen by the enigmatic Ilari are able to venture forth into the windswept wilds. They discover shards of time and space have slammed haphazardly together. I think that's what the environment design is. Industrialized cities from the 5th century lie in just abandoned ruin, crammed next to Bronze Age towns from the 1st century of the ancient era, in the shadow of robotic enclaves from a time after people. And this is about halfway
Keeps
through.
going.
feels like
Jesus, this is like the
it's-
most AI generated like storyline I've ever heard.
This feels like a back explanation for we wanted to jam everything in. And so we had to figure out a reason, like lore-wise, that you could have all of the things.
You would think so. And I don't like, I'm not tempted to test this hypothesis, but they say on Arkan Games' website, they say most of our games are set in a large, internally consistent, quote, Arkanverse. It's a really rich sci-fi landscape that spans a few trillion years of history and future, and which has ties to most of our games.
They definitely should have been just writing a science fiction series.
Yeah.
That being said, like, I feel like we've been really just bashing on this game. I did not hate it as much as you guys did. Like, I liked it significantly better than Hack Slash Loot. I like just jumping around was kind of fun, and I appreciated the scope of what they were trying to do. And I mean, granted, I basically just ignored all of the lore and just didn't pay attention to it. And it's like, I don't know, it seemed like it was diverting. It like, minus like the boss combat, I felt like you could just jump around and you could just mindlessly do stuff for a while.
Yeah.
Probably not what the game developers were looking for as like a play experience, but
there's a certain element of like overwhelming zaniness to this game that almost like the first like 20 minutes I was just like, okay, yeah, like this is pretty insane, like let's see just how crazy it gets. And I almost kind of wish it got like more crazy, because you get some of these well, I guess like so gameplay wise, you boot up the game and you select from 4 heroes that, you know, once you die, you know, in standard roguelike fashion, you pick another hero, all from the Ice Age, but picking them with various attributes of health, attack power, and mana. And I think they all start with the same power initially, but as you unlock things, you can get like crazy rocket turbo boosts, like ice powers, and various types of, I don't know.
there were big rocket things for a long time.
Yeah, some of the abilities in this game were just hilarious. With
Rock was best power.
like literally throwing like almost screen-sized boulders at things that there's no like real weight to it, but just like the visual, almost like the visual gag of like, and every time that like you summon one of these powers, you do some sort of like wacky pose.
Yeah, I back to the clip art. It did feel a little bit like you were in a PowerPoint presentation, and you summon this rock, you just kind of popped it onto existence and just kind of whoop, flew over. Yeah, having no weight to it feels like exactly the right phrase. The rock did not. There was no sense of like, I'm doing a large effort to use my magic to hurl a huge rock. It's like, oh, here's a rock. It goes
Summon, rock fly. But yeah, gameplay wise, you start in a tutorial world that I think does like a pretty decent job of like explaining like what the hell is going on. There's all this stuff. Hey, don't worry. Like the pause feature in this game is very helpful. So you can just kind of like, okay, let's stop and take a second and just kind of process what's happening. But you eventually wind up coming to a town that you build out some more infrastructure in, and you fight like comically oversized robot mini bosses all over the place. That is just kind of adds to like the overwhelming factor of like, okay, I've just booted this game up, I'm going in blind, holy shit, that's a huge robot, it's shooting all sorts of crazy stuff at me. I gotta jump in between all these like fire blasts. Kind of a fun idea. And then as soon as I got to like some of the other realms, I was just like, I don't know, there's just so much stuff to keep track of. It's like the exact opposite of hack slash loot in that sense, where like that game was very minimalistic. This is very maximalistic.
Yeah, it had a lot of stuff that you could try to do. And they were like, you have to love a game where there's a building in the town that's just like, what should you be doing right now? And you're basically just going to big old monocrystal, and it's just like, hey, I'm overwhelmed in the world, in quotes. Like, how about you magically tell me what I should do? It's like, yeah, they knew that they were going to need something to like give you priorities. But even then, it was still hard to know what you should be attempting to do. Like, you just go out on the map and do random missions and get rewards, but it did not feel like, despite having so many things, it did not feel like I had a whole lot of agency in terms of building things out. Really just like, you get what you get from these rewards. And maybe I just did not play for a long enough time, but
How long did you play?
3 or 4 hours.
Okay.
I think that's 4 hours longer, or 3 hours longer than I could physically sustain playing.
Right. No, I'm looking at my playtime right now, and so I feel disgusted that I can't even truly evaluate it beyond its surface level, because I have 39
No,
minutes.
Never
I just
mind.
couldn't take it. It was
Never mind.
too
I only
bad.
have 2 hours into it, but
It felt like 4 hours, I bet, though.
Yeah.
Honestly, I almost went back to play it the next day, but I needed to get through my games. But
well, speaking of getting through our games, let's talk about our
right.
last game for the episode today. Pineapple Smash Crew, released February 2nd, 2012, PC only exclusive. You can only find it on PC. This is shockingly the most indie out of all of these. The 1059th most popular roguelike with only 119 reviews, cranking in at a hot 67th percentile in the category. And this is a very I was almost going to say pixely, but it's not pixely. It is a twin stick shooter in a sense.
late 1990s arcade graphics.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Like N64, like large. It's 3D, but with not very many polygons.
I think you really hit it on a head there, that this would be such a great N64 game.
Oh yeah, this shit, I would have loved this. And honestly, I'm just go ahead and say I liked this game.
Yeah.
What?
I thought this game was
I
pretty
thought
good.
it was fun. I might play it in the future.
So,
I mean, it's the best of the three, to be sure, but of the three, I mean, of garbage. I mean, sorry, no offense out there again.
Well, let's real quick jump into a quick dev history here. So this was developed by Rich Edwards in Newcastle, England, our second English dev of the day, and from an early age he wanted to make video games. He was really kind of just sketching out map ideas and characters from things like Sonic and the game Cannon Fodder or Desert Strike and like Streets of Rage. I think, but I've probably done the exact same thing in middle school. But he took more of an interest in sort of the art side, and he wound up joining a mid-sized game company in Newcastle and wound up getting familiarized with this engine called the Quest 3D engine that was hilariously used a lot in like architecture visualization, but also a little bit for game design, which I thought was very interesting. He wound up using a lot of Maya at the time for 3D work and Photoshop. And he had looked into using Unity for Mac and Linux support. Would have loved to have Blender back in the day, I'm sure, but Unity, I think at this time was still in its infancy. So I think, it would make sense at the time to stay with the devil, for engine work and try to get it to work in there. He says in a quote, I found out about a business development scheme in Middlesbrough and called Digital City Fellowship that gives small grants to help startups, and luckily made it through the application process by showing them some game prototypes he'd made and talking about his ideas for Pineapple Smash Brew. He wound up taking this game to the indie games section of EGX, which I think is a game convention. And he had a connect there, David Hayward, who helped select that for the show. And the gaming magazine Rock Paper Shotgun wound up awarding Pineapple Smash Crew as their favorite game. David Hayward, his connect, encouraged Rich Edwards, the developer, to go to the Counter-Strike Global Offensive booth, which was like just launching at that time, way back when, if you can imagine. And mentioned to the reps there that, hey, I have this indie game, it just won an award. How would I go about getting this thing out on Steam? And they wound up, getting him connected and getting him help set up on the platform, which was super cool. This is another game that you can see clear inspiration from games that he was really inspired by, called Cannon Fodder, and the Sega Master System game called Gain Ground, which have very similar kind of game flows and designs to them, where you're kind of running around these environments and just blowing stuff up. But interestingly, he said he was also very inspired by the billiards game, or the part of the game Pool, for just having stuff like bop around corners and that kind of dynamic bouncing physics objects, he said, which I think you can kind of see a lot of inspiration from here. He said in a quote, if you're solo, I try, in terms of like developing games, he has a very good quote here. If you're a solo game developer, I'd say try to get in a position where you're self-sustaining, either with a day job or working evenings/weekends, or if you can get any kind of business grant or arts scheme, or if you're lucky enough just to be living with parents. But in some situation, for when time pressure to complete your project isn't crushing, because you need to feel free to explore ideas and prototypes before committing on a direction. Early access wasn't really a thing back in this time. And when he started, he would say that was a good way to help kind of sustain development and grow a community. Rich Edwards nowadays does freelance illustration, and you can find him at Twitter at RichMakeGame, until for however many days Twitter is left. I don't know if it's going to outlast the new head of lettuce, but we shall see. Story-wise in this game, I think there's a story. It seemed kind of interesting. There's elements where you can go
mothership eventually.
Yeah, and I was really motivated to try to figure out like, ooh, what's like the lore behind this. And this was something that it seems a little ancillary. I don't think it's really critical for the game.
I'm not sure that it's really a I don't think it's a game that is heavily based off of story.
No, but the idea here is that you boot this game up, you are pineapples, armored pineapples, question mark. I'm not quite sure where the pineapple bit comes from.
They're not pineapples. At some point they comment about how they would like to eat pineapples or something along those lines, like just in the text that randomly displays. So I'm pretty sure they're just some kind of a creature that's got 2 arms and 2 legs and armor.
Some like little yellow-headed Simpsons character, maybe in a giant suit of armor, which I think is kind of a fun character design. And you have 4 of these. I'm just going to call them pineapples because I like the idea that they are sentient pineapples in suits of armor. But you have machine guns. You're running around an environment that's like a spaceship filled with bugs and things that explode. And your goal is to go to some room that is labeled target on your mini map. You go in there and your mission objectives can range from blowing up crates to get little green blobs that are data cubes or something. It doesn't really matter. Or blowing up a big enemy. And once you've done that, dust your hands off. You're done with that level. You warp out, and your crew upgrades depending on how many blue little experience points you gain, which gives you little
upgrades. Yeah.
Well, it gives you a little bit of armor, I think, which helps. But I don't know. I didn't really see.
Was there actual armar?
Yeah, like
because as far as I can you could buy hats, and the hats did absolutely nothing.
No, when your people leveled up, they got bulkier. They got like better looking armor.
Oh, okay.
They didn't give you any stats on like if your guy was better, and you got better grenades. You had some.
Yeah,
some
the level gives
stuff.
you another grenade. I don't know if it's better. Honestly, if I could only have just the basic grenade, I feel like that would have been better, because then you just kind of diversify your pool of available grenades to shitty grenades eventually. But I guess it depends on your playstyle.
There's a lot of kind of, I think, interestingly designed power-ups in this game where it felt like pretty useful. It felt like everything kind of had their own use. You have like rockets, you have lasers, you have like healing beacons, you have like specific power-ups that like fear enemies away from you, or like quad damage things, which I thought was a good kind of element of like tactical usefulness of like, okay, I got to switch to this guy to use this vortex thing and collect everyone up and then shoot the rocket at them to blow them up, which as the game progresses, I think becomes a lot more necessary. And I wound up just using like these laser things that shoot through walls a whole lot. But
that's exactly what I mean.
But yeah, I think that like this game had a pretty decent amount of weapon variety, a pretty decent amount of like enemy variety between like, I think there was like zombies on some of these spaceships. There's like little arachnids and robots and kind of everything in between. But I wish that the boss design here was a little more varied.
Yeah, when you were talking about early access and how they didn't have early access then, this really does feel to me like a very good early access game. I looked at my stats. I played it for an hour, and I had like genuinely had a good time playing for an hour. I think this would be an absolutely amazing arcade game, like physical in-person arcade, like at a barcade type thing. It would be a great game for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I could get, like, I could probably get another hour out of it of like true enjoyment. And then as far as I can tell, that's basically just the same boss every level, which.
Yeah. And they get more armored as you go along through the story, which I don't know, like, I guess presents more of a challenge, but I just kind of found it more annoying, where you just have to like shoot between like the weak spots of the armor, and
it just takes longer.
Yeah, it just takes longer. It didn't seem like the usefulness of the tools as you learn them and like how to use those to kind of like defeat enemies and stuff really came into play that much with with the bosses specifically. I think
that
more
sense.
So with like
you get
levels.
like much better at like, okay, bouncing stuff around corners, like how to use these grenades. And then you get to the end and you're fighting this boss, and it's just a giant circle robot in a large open room, which is nothing like any of the other areas, and you just kind of have to blast at it for a long time. So it's you're building up your clearing corner skills, and then none of them are in any way used for the boss room.
Yeah.
What would you say is the primary source of fun for this game?
I think this is another game that I think like it kind of like does what it says on the tins. You are pineapples, you're a crew, and you smash stuff. That's it. I think like I kind of peaked with my enjoyment of it, like, right about like the hour level.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like a peak and then sharp decline. It was more kind of like a peak and then like a gradual decline of like, I kind of felt like sunk cost fallacy a little bit, because I'm like, I gotta know what the story here is. I gotta know like what the end boss is, because as you go through the game, you'll find these little consoles that give you encyclopedia, Weekarctica entries that like have like interesting little lore tidbits that don't really have much impact in the game at all. But I believe the more consoles that you access, the more it gives you like quote unquote like progress or like data points,
progress towards the mothership.
Yeah, which is the final boss, which Spoiler alert, and Super Bummer was just literally another like Roomba style giant tank thing,
Okay.
which
I'm glad
I
I
was
asked
super
you.
bummed by.
Because at about at the hour mark where I'm like, I've absorbed all the novelty out of this game.
Yeah.
Scott, do I continue on? Because I see I've got this degree of progress. I can like double or triple my time. And
No, I think like this is a game. I think Colin hit it on the head. This would be a great physical arcade game where you could either like solo, you're controlling like the squad yourself and kind of like switching back and forth between them, or if you had 4 people going simultaneously. I will call out though, anytime that a game uses a Total Recall quote, because as your little crew are running around, you're saying like, some like little action movie quips. One of them is, "You think this is a real Quaid? It is." Which I just had to pause and just give a slow clap for any kind of action movie, especially Arnold references in these games. But yeah, I think like if this was like a high score chaser or something along those lines,
I feel like this one was really close to being a really good small game. So we've been playing off Scott's Steam account. So I didn't actually buy this game. I just looked it up though. It's $10 if you're going to buy it by itself. And that feels like probably more money than I would be willing to pay for it. This feels like a $2.50 game because you're going to get like a good hour or two of fun out of it. Absolutely worth $2.50, maybe even $5.
Yeah.
From my perspective, but $10 feels like you should get more than what you got.
And I think to some degree, developers have to either set like sales schedules, or there's some kind of thing that requires developers to say like, "Oh, I'm going to set this game on sale to be X% off every so often," or whatever.
Well, except for Factorio, which
realizes
realizes their value.
I don't know that. I don't know. This is on the same even spectrum as Factorio, but
yeah, I think
no, I'm just saying that level that you don't necessarily need to have periods of discount. I mean, Arizona iced tea.
Yeah.
I mean, like they're Costco hot dogs.
Well, Costco hot dogs can't go on sale because they're literally losing money on every sale.
Right. Well, I mean, they could still go on sale, but is the loss leader?
At a certain point, they should probably just give away their food for free. They wouldn't lose more money. Not really. Anyway, I think this is the kind of game that's going for a different kind of audience from something like Factorio, though. Like, I could see booting this up, maybe not this exact game, but a game with mildly more content, a little bit more in terms of variability with upgrades. Like you could upgrade all of the grenades and the rockets and stuff, but you still had the same basic gun the whole time. And I was a little disappointed that you never got, just the standard, like, oh, instead of just firing straight, now it's firing the 3 that spread out, or like, oh, now it fires slower but longer but more powerful. It was surprising to me that you never upgraded that. It seems like they focused all of their upgrade efforts on these like grenade power up one-time use things. But I could see a game that's substantially the same as this, just with a couple of tweaks, being able to be like, once a month you come back, you play an hour, and you're just like, cool, fun, just getting a weird flow state.
And I will call out that the soundtrack to this game is pretty bumping. I think
I like the sound.
The soundtrack for this was pretty great.
It was it's actually the only game that we've played so far that I actually genuinely liked the soundtrack. I felt like it perfectly fit the like urgency of the game.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's move on to our rankings. Each episode, we do our due data diligence by ranking all of our games and compiling Google Sheets together to get the most authoritative, data-driven list of the best games, of the cream of the cream, the top of the roguelikes. For me, I'm putting Pineapple Smash Crew at my new number 3 game. So behind Dungeons of Dreadmore, and I'm going to put Hack Slash Loot just behind that. And maybe a little bit of controversy, I'm going to put Hack Slash Loot above Binding of Isaac, the original 2011 one. and then I'm gonna dump A Valley Without Wind at the bottom. I had a lot of fun playing Pineapple Smash Crew. I think there's a lot of positives, but I think like, yeah, if it was just like an arcade game, or if there was some arcade game that was like this, I could see busting this out for like a video game party or something, and be like, oh, you know, we should play this until we all die or something. And the music helps it out a lot. I think there's a lot of good like replay value here. Hack slash loot, I can appreciate what it was going for. For me, it just felt like way too random, and just like I didn't have enough control over what I wanted to do there. But I think that it's more worth checking out than Binding of Isaac now, because Binding of Isaac Rebirth just chaos dunks on top of the original 2011 version of it, that there's for me no reason to go back to original Binding of Isaac. But for A Valley Without Wind, I think like this was something that I tried really, really hard to just like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna buckle down. I'm gonna sit down, and I'm gonna try to read through this opening text crawl. And it was just like doing homework, and like just felt like such a slog. I'm happy that Arkan Games took the risk, and it was a commercial success for them. But oh boy, I will not be playing A Valley Without Wind 2, which is the only way that you can buy this game is with like the double pack bundle, which I thought was kind of, I don't know how I feel about that, but I don't know that that's really going to draw me into that second one. I will briefly call out with A Valley Without Wind, if you want to get a good grasp on like the total gameplay of it, YouTuber Etherville, ETHERVIL, has a good YouTube playlist series on like doing all of the dirty work of playing this game, so I don't have to, and going through at least like one major boss fight to clear up a continent. So if you're interested in seeing how this game plays out to that point, by all means go and check his stuff out. That helped me out a lot with just being like, oh my god, I don't know if I can boot this game up again.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I saw maybe the potential of A Valley Without. I appreciated the raw ambition. I can imagine myself making A Valley Without Wind, and being like, I want to do it all, and slowly pulling back and being like, I can't do it all. So I have Hack Slash Loot as my new lowest game at number 5, because I didn't rank Binding of Isaac the original because I didn't play it. Right above that, I have Valley Without Wind, and then Pineapple Smash Crew is dethroned or pushed down. Dungeons of Dreadmore is now my number 2 game.
Wow,
I liked it. I thought it was a fun game. I mean, granted, I got an hour out of it, but I had an hour of good fun out of it.
And you know what? That's an hour. Anytime that you're having good fun for an hour, even if you're like, okay, I'm done with this, I think that's well worth it.
It took me 30 seconds to understand how this game worked. I got 59 minutes of fun out of it, and I can put it down and be like, great. I don't feel compelled to. I don't feel like I missed out. Like Dungeons of Dreadmore or some of these other games, I feel like I put work in to understand what was going on, and then I thought a lot, and that's good for many games, but sometimes it's nice to just shoot some stuff, have some fun shooting stuff.
This is quite the opinion, Colin. Yeah, you can pick up anything really and do it for an hour and do it just kind of mindless shooting of things or whatever, but like, but this is the synergies in games, you know, some of the core game loop mechanics need to be super strong. You're trying to tell me right now that Pineapple Smash Crew is better than Dungeons of Dreadmore. And I have my problems, and you are. Incredible, because like that game, there's actual like synergies between the classes, between the like the actual options you select, how you take on battles. With Pineapple Smash Crew, you're just walking into a space, aiming, shooting with left click, and then eventually right-clicking on, you know, with one of your 4 different types of grenades.
Well,
that's like saying, I mean, you like both darts and chess. That's like saying darts is a bad game because there's no like, how do you calculate centipon loss for darts? It's like they're different games.
Right. No, darts. Okay. Right. I think fun is it's three things. It's accuracy, it's timing, and it's judgment. Those are the three atomic particles of fun. And so
Dredgemore has judgment and neither of the other two, and Pineapple Smash Crew has timing and
timing.
accuracy.
Does it even really have that? I mean, like,
yeah, grenade timing, managing to like bounce stuff around corners.
I guess that didn't feel like a much of a skill or timing thing. It was just like mostly just a hold gun at person and then occasionally right click, and then hopefully you have the right grenade selected. Otherwise, you're going to teleport into them.
Pineapple Smash Crew felt like eating a bag of potato chips, and Dungeons of Dredgemore felt like going to the gym. Like, you get stuff out of it at the end. You might be a better person for it at the end.
I don't know about that,
but I enjoyed that bag of chips right now.
Gotta get that
immediately.
I think it also has to do with the fact that you played Dungeons of Dredgemore for like I think I put like almost 10 hours into that game. So
sure, maybe I only got to the workout phase and I didn't get to the part where I looked good. I'm comparing it to a delicious bag of nacho cheese Doritos. My fingers are greasy and covered in cheese dust, and I'm like so satisfied. Versus the other time, I'm just sweaty.
Well, I'm gonna just in summary, I'm gonna agree with. I think I'm just looking at our charts right now of everything lining up, and I'm agreeing with Scott. It looks like overall. I did not actually play the original Binding of Isaac, so I have an NA value there, and I think Colin does too. So, but everything else lines up with Binding of Isaac Rebirth. That's our best. We got Dungeons of Dredgemore, and at the very bottom here, we got a value without win. That was just terrible. And then just above that, Hack Slash and Loot. And I did say, I mean, Pineapple Smash Crew was the best of the three we played today, or between the episodes. But I'm expecting that one to stay at the bottom as we play more games.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the rankings evolve over time. I'm curious to watch that standard deviation column to see what games we disagree on the most, and which ones maybe we agree on the most. But that wraps up our episode here on our first bundle of games with Hack Slash Loot, Valley Without Wind, and Pineapple Smash Crew. Next time, we're talking about another episode bundle of some smaller games, including Cargo Commander, Realm of the Mad God, and Din's Curse. So keep an eye out for those ones that we got coming up in the hopper. grogpod.zone at gmail.com if you have some corrections that you want to send in to us. We love engagement baiting people, so we'll intentionally get stuff wrong just to make sure that you're writing in emails and engaging with the podcast. I think that about does it. Any final thoughts about our games for today?
I'm looking forward to the next set. I'll say that much.
You think
I like Pineapple Smash Crew. Come at me.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.